Welcome back to CIA Declassified. In the spring of 1962, the top of the world was a ghost town. The Soviets had been operating a drift station called NP-8. They were studying the ice, but the CIA knew they were also tracking American submarines through the polar cap. Suddenly, the ice shifted, the runway cracked, the Soviets panicked and fled, leaving behind a treasure trove of documents and equipment. They thought the moving ice would swallow it all. They didn't count on the agency's willingness to jump into a frozen hellscape. This is Project COLDFEET. It's a story of two men, one B-17, and the most terrifying pickup, service, and human history. To get onto the ice, you need a plane. To get off the ice, you need a miracle. The CIA recruited Major James Smith and Lieutenant Leonard Leshak on May 28, 1962. They parachuted from a B-17 onto the abandoned station. The temperature was minus 30 degrees. A quote from a declassified Office of Naval Research report. The explorers found the station in a state of chaotic abandonment. Food was still on the tables, and the technical logs remained in the radio shack. It was as if the occupants had vanished mid-sentence, end quote. For 3 days, Smith and Leshak lived in the abandoned Soviet huts. They gathered over 150 pounds of paperwork, film canisters, and specialized sonar equipment designed to detect U.S. nuclear subs. The most dangerous part was the Skyhook of Fulton, the surface-to-air recovery system. This involved a 500-foot cable attached to a balloon. The B-17 had to fly directly into the cable at 150 miles per hour, catching it with a fork on its nose. A quote from Major James Smith's post-mission debrief. The wind on the ice was so fierce it nearly ripped the balloon from our hands. When the plane finally made contact, the jerk was so violent I thought the harness would snap my spine in two, end quote. The B-17 used in the mission was disguised as a commercial research craft to avoid Soviet radar detection during the long flights from Fairbanks, Alaska. Leshak was an expert in geophysics, allowing him to identify which Soviet instruments were revolutionary and which were junk. During the recovery, Smith was dragged across the ice for several hundred feet before the plane's lift finally yanked him into the sky. The agency discovered that the Soviets had developed a low-frequency acoustic system that could see through 500 feet of solid ice. Project COLDFEET provided the first physical evidence of Soviet efforts to map the Arctic seafloor for future missile deployments. The mission was so high risk that the pilots had to practice the Skyhook maneuver dozens of times over the desert using weighted dummies before heading to the Arctic. When the B-17 crew winched the men into the bomb bay, they found Smith and Leshak had suffered from severe frostbite, but were holding on to the Soviet bags like they were made of gold. The mission proved that the U.S. could retrieve personnel from behind enemy lines without ever landing a plane. The Soviet station eventually broke apart and sank into the Arctic Ocean just weeks after the CIA heist. The success of COLDFEET led to the Fulton system being featured in the James Bond movie Thunderball, though the real operation was much grittier. Technical intelligence confirmed the Sovietdrift station used specialized hydroacoustic sensors that could identify the specific engine signature of American submarines from miles away. A quote from a CIA Internal Technical Review dated 1963, "The retrieval of the Soviet sonar equipment has saved our own research teams approximately 3 years of development time in polar detection technologies." End quote. To prepare for the jump, the CIA operatives had to endure sessions in cryogenic chambers to test how their fine motor skills, like picking locks and operating cameras, would hold up in sub-zero conditions. The B-17 Flying Fortress used for the pickup was modified with oversized fuel tanks, allowing it to stay airborne for over 24 hours to ensure it didn't leave the agents stranded if the weather turned. Historical records indicate that the Soviet evacuation of NP-8 was so hurried they left behind a fully functioning shortwave radio transmitter, still tuned to Moscow's military frequency. While the Skyhook is public knowledge, the COLDFEET files are littered with black ink, specifically in the biological samples section. So, the heaviest redactions occur in a log titled Non-Human Occupancy. That's interesting, isn't it? There's a wild theory that the CIA didn't find the station empty. Speculation suggests the black bars hide the discovery of a Soviet experiment with sub-zero creatures engineered to survive the ice that had turned on their masters, and the agency is blacking out the search and destroy mission that followed. Some researchers believe the black bars in the coordinates section hide the ancient find. The speculation is that the Soviets hadn't abandoned the station because of the ice, but because they had drilled into a pre-human structure buried in the glaciers. The black bars cover the artifact inventory. There's a theory that the redactions in the Skyhook logs hide the third man. Speculation holds that Smith and Leshak didn't come alone. They found a Soviet scientist who had been left behind as a sleeper agent, and the black bars hide the brainwashing protocols used to turn him. Could the Soviets have been contacted? One bizarre theory suggests the black bars hide UFO tracking data. Speculation is that NP-8 was actually a monitoring post for craft entering the atmosphere over the North Pole, and the agency was blacking out alien flight paths. Some believe the redactions hide Project Absolute Zero. The speculation is the CIA found a Soviet weapon that could freeze an entire fleet instantly, and the black bars hide the thermal weaponry schematics. A rumor floating around retired agency pilots suggests the black bars hide the Arctic artifact. The speculation is that the Soviets had found a metallic sphere that emitted a signal not aimed at Earth, and the CIA's jump was actually to steal a piece of extraterrestrial hardware. There's a theory that the redactions in the atmospheric logs hide the weather machine. Speculation suggests the Soviets were using NP-8 to test a way to steer blizzards toward the American coast, and the black bars hide the climate warfare results. Whispers claim the black bars in the post-mission debrief hide the missing hour. The theory is that Smith and Leshak experienced telepathic interference while on the ice, and the redactions cover the transcripts of their shared vision of a city beneath the ice. Some believe the redactions hide the Nazi connection. Speculation holds that the Soviet station had actually stumbled upon a 1940s-era German ice base, and the black bars hide the swastika-stamped equipment the CIA brought back. Finally, some speculate the redactions hide the reality anchor. The theory is that the ice station was located at a point where the Earth's magnetic field was thin, and the CIA found evidence of parallel universe seepage, which they promptly blacked out to prevent a global existential crisis. Was Project COLDFEET a success? It was a masterpiece of ballsy espionage. The intelligence gathered allowed the U.S. Navy to track Soviet subs with terrifying accuracy. More importantly, it proved that nowhere on Earth, not even a shifting block of ice in a blizzard, was safe from the reach of the CIA. Arctic Ghost Heist changed the rules of the frozen frontier. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, the Fulton Skyhook, remember, we have a whole episode on that, too, if you're curious about it. The Fulton Skyhook validation. The mission proved that human pickup from the ground to a flying plane was a viable but ballsy, leading to its use by special forces for decades. Extreme Environment Intel Collection. The CIA established the first mobile Arctic extraction protocols. Acoustic countermeasures based on the Soviet sonar tech recovered the U.S. redesigned submarine hulls to be acoustically invisible. Cold weather survival gear. The equipment Smith and Leshak used became the prototype for modern high altitude and polar ops gear. Project COLDFEET shows us that the Cold War was often literally cold. It took a special kind of madness to jump into the white void for a bag of papers, after all. Thank you for listening. Join us next time as we examine Project Outreach. In the 1960s, the agency went on a different kind of hunt. They weren't looking for documents, they were looking for men. We'll uncover the obscure effort to recruit former Nazi scientists to serve as scientific intelligence assets in the South. We'll also dive back into the Cuban files to look at the plot to poison Fidel Castro's wetsuit with a fungus that would cause a chronic skin disease. How do you turn a war criminal into a Cold War ally? Join us for The Nazi Asset. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.